Just want to make sure everybody can hear okay. We're good? All right. Well, thanks again, guys, for being here. We just met for the first time just a few minutes ago. This is, I think, an organic discussion on the state of Solana. And I think what we have here today are some interesting folks and some perspective that we'll be able to get when it comes to the Solana ecosystem and the Solana network. So really quickly, though, I figure we just kind of introduce ourselves. I'll start real quick, kind of reiterating what Seth just said is, as an analyst at Messari, my role is to cover base layer protocols and report on them on a quarterly basis, right? So in a time series, with an effort really aimed at just tracking the progress and health of a network and ecosystem. Similar to sort of what you see in traditional finance, right? And every quarter we're producing quarterly reports that just sort of evaluate how a company might be doing, right? Or something like that. So similar model to that. And I'm an analyst that's again focusing on layer ones, including Solana. So that's me. Now we just move down the line, and I guess you guys, quick introduction on yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Can you guys hear me? Cool. So my name is Uddhav. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Friktion Labs. We're a DeFi protocol built on Solana. Friktion enables access to portfolio management Legos or strategies that can survive in multiple market cycles, ranging from options overriding to now institutional credit. And we started building on Solana and launched on Mainnet in December of 2021. Since then, we've done about 2.8 billion in volume across the assets on the network, through mostly auction style rather than continuous liquidity, which we can touch upon on one of those benefits of Solana. And yeah, excited to chat with you guys about why we chose Solana and then why we think DeFi is really set to explode in this ecosystem.
My name's Matthew. I'm the CEO of SIno. We like to think we're the best emerging market-focused investors in crypto in the world. We're ecstatic that Solana is one of our portfolio companies, as well as many companies and projects across the Solana ecosystem.
Awesome. So again, two very different people here, right? I don't know. Do you guys know each other pretty well? Have you met before, or is this the first time?
Online friends.
Okay.
Online friends. They're an investor, so we have worked with them before.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
One of our gems.
In any case, we have an investment mind and a builder looking at Solana. And Matthew, I know you've been around crypto for a really long time. I think I saw as early as 2013. Is that fair to say?
2013 was my first attempt to integrate what was then my hobby into my professional life. So that was my first trying to have a coming out party. I was a little too early, but yeah, I've been around for a little while.
Fair enough. So, question for you. Obviously, Solana comes later. And what I'm going to ask both of you ultimately is, why Solana? But from your perspective as an investment professional, why Solana? What was it about Solana, especially early on? Because I believe you led or were part of the seed round. What was your process, I guess, for coming up with your conviction in Solana?
So, investing at seed, ultimately, you're betting on founders. So obviously, we first and foremost had an enormously you had enormous respect for Anatoly as a brilliant mind, and also as someone that you could have high trust in, because that's so important in our industry, even more so than if you're making a big bet in TradFi. But I think number two, when the Solana vision was first explained to me, it really reminded me of when we moved from single core to multi-core CPU architecture. So it reminded me of, this is some time ago, but there was a point in time where it was all about clock speed. How can we get faster clock speed? That was the driver, and it was getting increasingly difficult to do. So kind of like, you could think of that as trying to push the boundaries of faster blockchains, and kind of many people working on similar things. And then we moved to multi-core, we moved to multi-threaded, and it was really a different way of thinking about speed. And that's, to me, that was the way Anatoly was thinking and what Anatoly was working on. And so it was clear to me that this was an enormously talented engineer with a team and a vision that I trusted, and that's almost the definition of making an asymmetric bet at seed.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The asymmetric bet. You don't really hear that used too often, but that's a fantastic approach. And about what time was that? Like, when was
so
began the process?
we were extremely early, but we built up our initial position in the secondary market, and then we later participated in rounds. So you could say we were after Solana was listed, but extremely early. You could kind of think of it in that way.
Got it. All right, so we have an investor with his perspective as to why Solana. Now, you're investing in a completely different way, and that's with your time and your knowledge, and maybe financially as well, but obviously your time is where you're really allocating your resources on the Solana blockchain, building Friktion, right? Tell us about your process. How does somebody that's developing an application figure that out? Decide, is Solana your best fitted, or maybe it was Ethereum, maybe it could be any chain. I don't know. Nobody seems to fully agree on where it is best to build. However, you go through some sort of process, I imagine, that helps you decide or has helped you decide why Solana.
Yeah, this is a great question because it somewhat echoes the theme of speed, particularly with a focus on throughput, which you can measure in one sense with transactions per second on the blockchain. We liked Solana initially because a lot of our team comes from the trading world. So we were quant traders, market makers, and researchers. And then we also had done things on Ethereum and other EVM ecosystems. And we kind of saw the trade-offs that they made. We saw Anatoly's approach, kind of didn't believe in things like sharding, which we thought was exciting, very, very kind of uniquely minded in that sense. And then the idea of Solana being or Serum being a fundamental primitive to Solana. And for those who aren't aware of what Serum essentially is a central limit order book type infrastructure that allows anyone to create a market in the form of an order book on Solana. And with the existence of Serum and kind of the promise of a lot of TPS, very high TPS, we thought that Solana was on track to be able to support very high frequency trading. And a lot of the systems that we looked at in the HFT world before this kind of look a lot like Solana. I mean, parallel processing, as Matthew was talking about, is a big innovation that we haven't seen on many other blockchains. And we also really liked the idea that the ecosystem was full of people who understood markets more than really any other ecosystem we touched. And by that, I mean, when you're building something, you often think about, in the beginning, you don't really think too much about your users, and then as you grow, you're like, oh, well, we've talked to all these users, they tell us this feedback, and as we started to talk to them, we realized that Solana has this very interesting base of institutional users that not really any other chains touch. This covers market makers, lenders, traders, and even centralized institutions who are trying to offer similar products that are built on Solana to their end user. So we saw the opportunity for Solana as being quite large in that sense, and we thought the system looked very similar to kind of trading systems that we'd worked in before. And then obviously there's a lot of good investors in the ecosystem, I think, who are really there to try to support projects and help grow from the early stage. So it's a good combination of factors there.
Okay, so in a way, somewhat similar to what Matthew is sharing, as far as the background robustness of the ecosystem, the community, leadership. I guess it's not every day that I get to sit next to somebody who's actually building something on a blockchain. Can you share like a little bit, I guess, from your perspective, what is the development experience like on Solana, or have you evaluated other experiences to kind of like have a feel for, like, look, Solana has all of these advantages. It's fast, right? TPS can go through the roof, right? It's built in such a way to be able to handle many transactions, but is there an experience also actually working with the platform that you think that, I guess, has an advantage over other systems, or any thoughts, I guess, you have about the development experience would be great.
Yeah, so from the developer side, I think one of the most exciting things was, just for folks who aren't aware, Solana is mostly written, contracts or programs in Solana are mostly written in Rust. And then a couple of folks launched what's called the Anchor framework that sits on top of the kind of normal Solana execution. And that made it a lot easier for developers coming into the ecosystem to be able to build on Solana. I think this really took off like a year and a half ago, maybe even a year ago. And as that's happened, I think a lot more people are coming into the ecosystem. Rust almost always been kind of a somewhat more esoteric language, which is really used in trading alongside languages like C++. So it attracted a different type of people, a different type of person into the community. I think from the developer side as well, there was just a lot of uncertainties because Solana was kind of, I mean, people forget, like Solana really launched, like remember, I think Sol launched, what, March of 2020 in liquid markets, the token? And yeah, that was like right as COVID hit, right? And it's been 2 years of Solana development compared to like, what, 8, almost 9 years in other ecosystems or other large L1s. So the pace at which Solana has, our teams have built on Solana, we think is quite impressive, which speaks to the kind of improving developer experience. And then Solana as a labs and foundation has put a lot of resources into hacker houses, which are essentially, you could think about them as gatherings for developers or gatherings for people building an ecosystem to kind of communicate with each other and flesh out ideas, turn ideas into projects, turn those projects into applications or infrastructure, whatever they kind of view as what they're building to the ecosystem. So I think that Solana Core has been very receptive to feedback. I think historically it's been really kind of focused on the NFT space, and we're seeing a lot of attraction now into DeFi now that we've really seen that things like Mango Markets, which is a perpetuals DEX on Solana, enables cross-margining across a bunch of assets, while a comparative project, let's say DYDX on an EVM chain, enables margining with just a single asset in USDC stablecoin. So we think the innovations that Solana enables uniquely are what's driving a lot of people into the ecosystem, and always like pretty exciting to see new things come into the market.
I just wanted to jump in here real quick to say we've talked about throughput, but I think it's important to mention also that Solana is extremely interesting across other dimensions as well, which are very important for things like high frequency trading. The fact that the cost per transaction is so low relative to other blockchains really fundamentally opens up an entirely new design space. There are things that are not in any way possible on other blockchains that we've already seen and will continue to see on Solana.
Great. Thanks for that perspective. And this question is really for either of you or both of you. So that's kind of thinking about the past, why you're here today. And I think some interesting insight there. We all know that Solana went through the roof in pretty much every metric that you can evaluate, all the way from its asset price down to network activity. And it did come with some challenges, right? There were some growing pains. We saw a lot of network congestion. We saw even some outages over the course of first quarter and into the second quarter. However, very quickly, some solutions began to roll out. And I think those were some interesting challenges that we're now starting to see some strategies putting in place to mitigate some of those risks. And that kind of led us to the end of Q2. And from there, the network has very much stabilized. So with that in mind, we have some things coming up that I think will be implemented that I think a lot of people are excited about. But is there anything in particular now as you look at where the network's going, where DeFi is going, or anything specifically that you are particularly excited about?
So I would emphasize the fact that I think the narrative, it's fair to say, as you alluded to, that Solana was to some extent a victim of its early and fast success. And as you mentioned, with fee markets and things like that, we've really already mitigated some of these issues. I don't think that's quite become the narrative yet. So so I'm looking forward to people kind of realizing that we've moved past some of these issues. But then also, it's super exciting to see these extremely powerful indicators of adoption, even with our challenging macro environment. So even NFTs are getting real hot on Solana. Again, there's a lot of different things. People are building out gaming projects on Solana, including, by the way, where SIno acquired a couple game studios, so we are launching our own games on Solana, SIno Games. There's really a lot of signs of adoption and health across the ecosystem that I don't think have quite percolated into the popular narrative yet. And to me, those are the signs of health, even if it doesn't become sexy until a bull market. Those are the signs of health that are really quite important.
Yeah, I think I would just add on that one interesting metric is USDC issuance, or it's the stable coin by Circle and Coinbase, is second largest of any chain on Solana, which has happened in like less than 2 years, which is quite impressive because I think it speaks to the institutional growth that we're going to see within the Solana ecosystem, particularly around DeFi. A lot of the applications that we've seen unlock a large retail user base are, I think, us included, and particularly we feel that when institutions come into DeFi, they need a couple of things. They need proof of scalability, security, and they generally need transparency, which DeFi, it's a big sell for DeFi, right? It's like you have clear risk management that's on-chain and monitorable. And a lot of what we see in terms of the user experience on Solana is, it really is amazing in many applications that you use, not just because of the low fee and the high throughput. It's really because of the developer work that goes into building this application that's very much focused on kind of the end user. I think we'll see Solana DeFi or Solana dApps in general kind of take this transition to bringing more mainstream adoption into DeFi as things like Helium come through, right? And Helium is a mobile network essentially that's now coming to Solana, which I think helps Solana's next frontier. And maybe Matt can talk a little bit about that on how we access a large wave of users through mobile, including the Solana phone saga.
Yeah, Matt, do you have words kind of on that point?
I certainly share the view that Solana has some very creative adoption strategies, including mobile. The Saga phone is really more for developers, but it's going to. I do think that there's a likelihood that will open up a whole new frontier of users, which is really what the crypto ecosystem needs as a whole to be able to take that next step for mainstream adoption.
Cool. Kind of going back to what you said a moment ago, the narrative, right, there's still this sort of, I guess, unawareness that solutions are rolling out, and it really hasn't caught on yet that they're actually working in terms of the network reliability, right? The narrative had been, the network keeps going down, there are outages, it's not working, it's junk, right? Well, going to have just plugging a little bit Messari here, is that we are tracking that, right? And we did see very clearly in the data that as soon as version 1.10 several iterations of that upgrade began to roll out, instantly we saw TPS hit all-time highs, right? So here we are in a downward spiral across the entire market, yet more transactions per second and hitting the highest TPS that we had seen on Solana after these upgrades began to roll out. And they're rolling out slowly, and there's going to be future iterations. So I think that is something we will be tracking, and we'll be able to point to a couple of different metrics to, to be able to say, like, it is working. And I think, for all of us, we really should, not be, have a tribalistic sort of viewpoint on things. Like, we should be happy that things are working, right? I know that I am. It's good to see solutions rolling out. So again, we've all been kind of going through, like, well, why Solana? What about Solana? Why you build on it? Why you invested on it? And it's what you're excited about. Do you ever think about, again, what's ahead in terms of the competition, right? So we have all kinds of systems coming yet, and networks coming, and maybe you're interested in some of those as well. I don't know if that has an impact on your decision to build on Solana or not, but do you see a world where, say, Ethereum and many systems moving into the world of a modular design or building a modular network, and Solana being monolithic in its design, these networks being able to coexist? Why or why not?
So from our perspective, I think it's well known that SIno doesn't invest in direct competitors, which is something that we do maybe a little differently than other people. But at the same time, we fundamentally believe in a multi-chain world. We fundamentally believe that the crypto story is one that is still early. So we don't view blockchains as competing for market share with each other. We don't view those quite as direct competitors. We view it more as we're all going out to get mainstream adoption in kind of different ways. And that's why we invest across multiple public blockchains. SWI is now a portfolio company. We're investors in Polygon as well as Solana. So we really think that this is a story that is still very early for our industry as a whole. And rather than thinking of Solana competing with SWI, things like that, it's more about we're competing with TradFi. We're competing for mainstream. We're competing with other types of attention for mainstream users, and together onboarding them into crypto is really the way I would suggest is a good way to frame that issue.
Yeah, I really agree with the idea that it's not going to be zero sum. I think the ways different blockchains at the layer one, or whether it's a roll up, or whether it's a omni-chain solution, whatever it may be, they're all going to try to bring users into an ecosystem and keep them in that ecosystem. So the strategy that every L1 uses often is quite different. If you look at what Polygon did versus what Avalanche does, or versus what Arbitrum does, quite unique go-to-markets. And those are what bring users to the table at the end of the day and start interacting with the blockchain. I think one thing that we're particularly excited about in kind of the multi-chain world is like, how do we enable a user from any chain to deposit into Friktion? Because in 1 or 2 years, I don't think, if we do kind of get to this mass adoption point, I don't think many users will really care what chain they're on. They'll only care about what feature they're getting, what product they're getting, and how much it costs in the DeFi specific landscape. And I think when we get to that scale, a user wants to touch a dApp from any chain they're on. So there's some interesting solutions out there in the kind of interchain or interoperability space. Things like Wormhole, which enable kind of bridging between different L1s and L2s. Things like Layer 0, which kind of create this interesting idea of an omni-chain messaging system, and then also allow you to interact with a lot of different networks. We think those are quite promising. I mean, everything in crypto has to prove the test of time, or last the test of time, right? It takes years for these things to get proven out and prove their security trade-offs and how they may scale. So yeah, we're particularly excited to bring more users in, regardless of what layer one we are natively deployed on. We also really think that when an institution thinks about crypto, they ask a couple of questions, but they're not very well versed as to what's happening with the different layer ones. They want to understand why you're touching something, why you're using that blockchain, and why it may be superior. But besides that, it's not really having to necessarily sell Solana to an institution that comes to use DeFi on Solana. It's really explaining to them, like, how does the system work, and understanding the trade-offs. So,
makes sense. Yeah. So kind of what I'm hearing there is they will coexist because they will all have some value proposition that exists for a specific use case, perhaps. Maybe it works better for one builder to build on one chain versus another, or maybe there's multiple chains, right? So like there may be a specific reason, but ultimately a user in mass adoption isn't necessarily going to care what network it's running on. So
sure. So I think what you just mentioned is a really important point, that ultimately what mass adoption is likely to look at is you won't even necessarily know as a normie user that you're using a crypto product. You'll be playing a game and you'll be doing things in game, and you won't think, oh, I just bought an NFT. It'll just be part of the game. So I think it's important to understand that mass adoption won't be my mom or my sister's thinking, I'm using Solana right now. They'll just be using their phone or playing a game and things like that. They won't, they probably won't think about and certainly won't care that it's programmed in Rust, or that it's Ethereum or whatever.
okay, great. Well, we have 6 minutes left. I don't want to be the one driving everything. I guess we can keep it in Solana, but I love the two different perspectives that you guys are bringing. I would say we could close it off maybe like about 3 minutes each. What's next for you? Like really, you mentioned building a game on Solana, right? You're continuing to build out Friktion Labs. Like, I guess give us a little bit more about what's next specifically for you guys and what you're looking ahead on in the Solana ecosystem.
Yeah, I can start off. I think, so as Friktion builds DeFi products on Solana, a big thing for us, a big question we're asking is, it's like, where are new users, incremental users coming into the ecosystem from? And as we understand, this user base has, I think, become a lot more institutionalized in the last couple of months. And we expect that it will continue to institutionalize over the next year. So recently, Friktion announced that we're launching Friktion Institutional, which is essentially the first time we think we've seen DeFi at scale try to go to market using its true values, DeFi values. Let's say things like transparency, composability, and security of the underlying blockchain it uses, to take to institutions the products that we have and say, this is the first time you can access decentralized risk management, a basket of strategies that perform in different market cycles in DeFi rails, while also having access to kind of the core team that Friktion Labs has, that are the developers to Friktion, to kind of build and innovate new products as they see fit for regions. So we're quite excited to kind of connect what exists in our product suite today with institutions. And when you think about institutions in crypto, it's such a meme that it's like, oh, institutions are coming and you have mass adoption on this side. We tend to think about it as everyone has their own requirement. Often there's no standardization in DeFi, which is what makes it challenging to say, as an institution, I want to touch, well, let's say I'm a foundation or I'm a corporate treasury, and I want to access DeFi for some source of yield. It's very confusing because there's no standards as to, this is the risk you're taking and this is the reward you're getting. So a lot of our focus has been on risk management and being very transparent about what's happening behind the product, and doing things that anyone should be able to understand. I think is communicating to the audience is generally pretty challenging in DeFi, especially because most projects are kind of very short dated. So yeah, we're definitely in it for the long term. Friktion Institutional is a big part of our push. And then Friktion Learn on the education front, which is more of an academy to onboard into DeFi.
So for SIno, two things that we're most excited about. Number one is doubling down on our core competency of emerging markets from Egypt to Malaysia and everywhere in between, Greater China, India, et cetera. We're thrilled to be doubling down on being able to bring our portfolio companies to those regions, as we've seen with Axie Infinity in the Philippines, for example. And it's not necessarily widely known, but Greater China was essential to STEPN's success. We've seen that these markets can really make a project. So we're doubling down on our core competency of emerging markets, number one. And then number two, we, as with many of us, we are bullish on gaming, on Web3 gaming, but we view it as gaming with a little crypto rather than maybe what's been the case so far, which is crypto, and then, by the way, it's a game. So the two pain points thus far, in our view, with crypto gaming is, number one, frankly, that games have to be fun, right? You can't have a game and say, oh, well, there's an economy, people are playing the game because, no, the game has to be fun. It has to start, if you don't have a game that's fun, it's not gonna work long-term in any way. That's just not the way anything works. So, number one. And then number two, you have to have sustainable token economy. So, crypto in general is extremely susceptible to reflexivity. So momentum generating as an economy expands, and then if you do not have a constant influx of new users, then it starts to pop, and it's momentum generating on the way down as well. So you have to have a very elegant, thoughtful, sustainable, long-term token economy, just in general in crypto, but also for gaming as well. So we're, long story short, we're super excited about SIno games, where we have games that are actually fun to play, and yes, they are crypto games. We have 3 that are coming out soon: Tearing Spaces, My Animal Friends, and Thalassa, and they're a lot of fun. We actually have one person that played for the alpha version of Tearing Spaces for 9 hours, and somehow we couldn't even figure out how they unlocked a level that we hadn't meant for people to be able to see yet. We got a lot of fun stuff going on, so we're extremely excited about SIno games.
And that's built on Solana.
Built on Solana.
Got it. Okay. Well, we're at time. Again, really appreciate you guys' perspective on everything. The state of Solana, what we're generally hearing here is we know that solutions are rolling out. The network health is improving, and in a really, it's probably in its best position yet, as well as a growing ecosystem across DeFi, GameFi, NFTs. We're going to continue to see that. I'm sure we'll start seeing more in the creative space, metaverse, things like that. We'll continue to track. We'll be watching Friktion, right? We're continuing to track the network, and we look forward to seeing SIno Games drive some activity to the network as well.
Also, may I, James? Sorry, you mentioned before. I just wanted to say that your coverage of Solana is really quite good. There's a quarterly report, which is, I don't know if that's something that you write, but whoever does it, it's really quite well done, and the metrics and the graphs and the analysis. So I wanted to mention that people should continue to follow your coverage of Solana.
I agree. Thank you.